I have with me here Caleb Wooding. Caleb first moved to York in August 2008 and has lived, worked and studied in the city ever since. Last December he was heavily involved in the peaceful occupation at the University of York against tuition fees. He has been an active member of York Stop the Cuts and has been a regular participant in protests. Caleb is the Green Party candidate in the upcoming local elections for the Heslington ward. That's the ward that houses about 3,000 students, most of the students who live on campus, in fact. So it's great to be speaking to you. It's great that York can speak to you, Caleb.
You too, Alan. It's nice to talk to you.
Excellent. Caleb, do you think the university should be charging £9,000 tuition fees?
I think that universities should be charging less than that, but the main problem as I see it is that the university isn't including students at all in the decision-making process. So it's just a largely behind closed doors thing. The No to 9K campaign is supposed to be countering that. It was trying to get more student representation in the decision as to what the university should be charging. So firstly, my personal opinion is that I think they should be charging somewhat less than £9,000. I think that £9,000 is far too off-putting a price tag. And secondly, I think that students should be more able to discuss and be part of the decision-making process with the university senior management group.
So, what level do you think the university should be charging?
Well, the replacement rate is about £7,500. That's how much it would cost to deliver the same quality education as people are getting now. The quality of education, which I think is rather good. And the top course is £9,000. So I think that they should be charging somewhere between there, and I think that there should be negotiation between the different interested parties to decide what the actual rate should be.
Okay, so the problem I have, Caleb, you're looking at this. Aren't you really, though? If you're saying student fees should be £7,500, not £9,000, aren't the people that are going to benefit those in reality be people that are earning over £31,000 on average over the rest of their lifetime? You're talking about the top 25% of earners here you're protecting, aren't you? If you say 7,500 instead of 9,000?
Alan, I didn't say 7,500. I said at least £7,500. And I said that it's open to negotiation what people want to have in the end.
Okay, but so you think it should be on a sliding scale between 7.5 and 9 then?
Well, at some point in between that, yes. Not negotiation on a case-by-case basis between students and the university. I mean, fee settings should be subject to negotiation. Sorry if you've misunderstood me.
Oh, no, okay. We've got a situation here in Heslington where we've got probably about 3,000 students who are going to be moving out in about 8 weeks after the elections. So, you know, most of your electorate are going to be moving out after the elections. What issues, therefore, do you think they should be voting on at this local election?
I think that most students are voting largely on national issues. They see the local elections as the chance to express their opinion on various policies, which I wouldn't entirely dissuade them from doing, because I think that is a fair enough use of the election. But the other thing that I think that students should be voting on is they should be thinking about the position of students. Because even though the current people voting will be gone at the end of this academic year, moving into their old rooms will be a whole new fleet of 3,000 more students. And I think that people don't really find it too difficult to imagine what Heslington needs in terms of the fact that it does have about 1,000 residents who are not students and about 3,000 residents who are students. I think people are well able to consider the position of the future residents when they're voting, as well as themselves. Thank you.
Okay, Caleb, do you think that the local elections therefore will have a big impact on students' lives then?
Yes, students' lives. I don't know if it will be these students particularly, but it's students in general, yes. The university interacts with the council all the time over various planning issues. Approving Heslington East required a massive amount of working together, and these are things which impact directly on students' lives. So who their representative on the council is matters just as much as who's running the university. I can't even really describe how much it's going to matter to people, particularly with the new issues of student housing which are coming up. I think that that's going to be something which the council has a lot of involvement in, and I think that's something that students should bear in mind.
It's interesting you should mention student housing. The students' union has described the plans the current council has to put regulations on the number of student houses that can be built as detrimental for students. With that in mind, what if you're elected as the councillor for this area, what will you be doing to fight against them?
Fight against the plans?
The plans which have been described by the university, the student union, as detrimental for students. Yes.
I think that this isn't such a binary thing as you're making it out to appear. It's not the case that we can say we can either be for or against these plans. If we're for them, we have to support everything that's said by the council, and if we're against them, we have to oppose everything that's said. I mean, that's just not how this is too complicated to look at in that sort of way. I think that since the plans got unanimous support on the council, there's really nothing that the students' union can do about that. And I think that it does address one of the biggest concerns that residents had, whether that's right or wrong. What I can do for students is I can try and make sure that the plans go ahead in a way which is beneficial to students, and make sure that there's adequate student housing being built once the conversion of family homes into student housing is stopped. I think that it is a delicate issue, and I think that there is scope here for students to be damaged. I'm not going to deny that, and that's part of the reason that I'm going to be trying so hard to make sure that these plans go ahead constructively. I don't think it's going to be a worthwhile quest to try and stop the Article 4 direction, as I think it's called, going through. I think that's impossible considering the council all voted for it. That kind of support doesn't happen that often. So yeah, that's not the approach which I think is going to be most beneficial to students this time around.
Do you think the council was right to vote it through unanimously?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think that it didn't really receive the proper debate it should have done. I mean, I think that it was always going to happen, and the relative merits of the different schemes which could have been taken into account, I think that they possibly weren't discussed in enough depth. At the moment, what they've got is I think it's a blanket Article 4 direction, which means that they can limit student housing in every area of the city, and something more targeted possibly could have been more beneficial. But I mean, that was all water under the bridge by the time I got involved. Everything was already underway. So when I delivered a speech at the local development framework meeting, most of my focus was on what planning solutions there could be to make this plan work as well as possible for students.
And so, if elected as councillor for Heslington, what sort of things will you do to help students who are worried about their housing?
I think the housing problem, and I think that it's part of a greater problem. It's part of there's a combined housing and transport strategy issue which needs to be addressed here. Because if student housing is being limited to try and prevent what people are calling studentification, which is when you've got a higher than what some people see as sustainable level of student houses in an area, which leads to things like the closure of schools and whatnot. People are worried about that, and so, but it's not very helpful to then say, well, we can't have student houses here, because all that does is drive students into different areas where they'll have harder lives, having to go further to get to university, trying to use transport links which sometimes won't even exist. So I think that the solution to this is to have joined up long-term planning with respect to this issue, but also to make sure that there's an integrated housing and transport solution to it, because if better transport links are established, which means better, more frequent, cheaper bus services for students, better and safer cycle lanes, all these things, if we can have that, then the housing problem isn't as much of a problem. People can live slightly further away, which increases the area within which student houses and student accommodation of other sorts can exist. And also, they can still get to university in a sensible amount of time. So that's one of the things I think we can do. Another thing that I think we can do is look at maybe slightly more imaginative schemes. If people are so worried about student houses existing, I mean, maybe what people should be doing, residents that is doing things like taking on lodges and stuff. I think there's quite a lot of postgraduate students who, instead of living in houses of multiple occupation, probably wouldn't mind living in lodgings instead, which is when you just have a family rents out one of their rooms to someone, often a student. And yeah, that's the kind of thing that's worked well in the past, and I think that it could work well in the future. So I think we need to be imaginative with the different kind of solutions that we think of these things.
It's an interesting one, and as councillor, you would be responsible for representing not only the student population in York, but also the resident population. The local York population in the Heslington village. Do you think that'd be a difficult task?
I think that it's a complicated task. I think that it involves a slightly different job description than a councillor usually gets. Usually a councillor thinks of themselves more as a representative of everyone, and I'll still be doing that, but another thing which I'll have to be doing is being something of a go-between between the student and resident populations, being a mediator and trying to work out what's most beneficial to both parties, which is something I'm very interested in. I'd like to see how that works out. And whenever there's conflict, which there is some conflict about this, not so much between students and residents, that's not really the issue here. It's mostly between residents and the university as an entity, because the university has a bad reputation for not doing quite enough consultation on things before going ahead, or once it has established a plan, not sticking entirely to the plan once the implementation phase comes in. So I think that, mediating between those two groups is something which I would be really interested in, and I think will make a really good difference to people's lives. So but I don't see it as a conflict of interest. I see it as a part of the job will be talking to people with very different interests and trying to find out what's best for all of them.
Okay, and I'm just looking down. It seems the Green Party are in fact running more candidates than the Conservatives these local elections. If we wake up on May the 6th to a Green Party controlled council in York, what do you think the differences we'd see are?
Well, as I've mentioned before, I think one of the main things would be just much better clarity of long-term planning, but I think, speaking in terms of real politics, it's very unlikely for that to happen. In terms of funding, there's only been 6 or so wards where the Green Party has had its very strongest candidates, and the other ones, it's been mostly just seeing what the public mood takes. All of the people running would be brilliant councillors. I know quite a lot of them personally. As for the Conservatives, I think the reason they're running so few candidates is to do with it's more of an organisational failure than a party political one. Now, the Green Party, what it's trying to do isn't gain control of the party and gain control of the council. At least speaking for myself, I don't really think like that. I think it's more the council is something which you can either contribute positively to or not. I mean, the two largest parties, the Lib Dems and the Labour Party, I've noticed them at various council meetings, accidentally I assume, slipping into the habit of thinking it's some sort of competition mostly more than anything else, where the parties have to win points off each other. And that's not the kind of party you get involved in. It's just the case that in council we have to make decisions, often very difficult ones, affect how the city works, and we have to try and make it so that it's a better functioning city and that it works better for people who live here. And sometimes politics can get in the way of that. So if the Green Party do have a good showing on May the 6th and pick up, 10 councillors or something, then I think that's something that we can really bring there. It's just a political climate with less politics going on.
The Liberal Democrats have got quite a large majority in Heslington. Do you think you're going to be able to beat them?
Well, they don't actually have a majority because they've got less than 50%, so it's not an absolute majority. But the Lib Dems got 38% of the vote in 2007 compared to the Greens' 23% and Labour's 22%. I think that since the Lib Dems got roughly half of their support from campus and half of it from the village, the campus side of it probably won't be quite as strong this time due to quite a lot of anti-Lib Dem feeling among students over the fees issue. People possibly haven't entirely forgiven Labour for their 13 years in government, and there's no Conservative running. So I think this is possibly one of the best years to date for the Greens in terms of our opportunities here in Heslington.
And finally, the last question we have is to say do you think it's important for students to vote in these elections, and if so, why?
I think it's very important for students to vote in the elections. One thing which I've come across is that even though people aren't actually anti-student within the city, they do have a lot of scepticism about the university, and sometimes that's sort of deflected onto students. And I think that if students don't vote and they aren't a core part of the electorate, then sometimes their politicians won't serve them like they should, like in some of the wards where you get quite a lot of students living like Hull Road. Fortunately, Fishergate is not like that. But I think that if students need to vote so that they can ensure that students get a good deal out of the council. Otherwise, they might find themselves on the wrong side of the electoral mathematics.
Excellent. Caleb Wooding, thank you very much indeed for speaking to the Yorker.
Thank you, Alan.
Cheers.
So long.